without any further ado, I'm really, really pleased to introduce BT futurologist Dr. Nicola Millard, who's head of Customer Insight and Futures, who's going to give us her intake on the 6 Ds, driving the future of work. Dr. Hilary Millard.
Thank you very much. Hello. Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Nicola. I was a futurologist. You will notice I am now not officially a futurologist, which means I always say it was voted the most pretentious job title of the year in 2007, so I'm not necessarily that sad seeing that job title go, and also the crystal ball jokes were getting a bit much as well. So I get asked all the time, do I have a crystal ball? And I keep saying, yes, I do. Doesn't work though, so I do have to work slightly harder for my living than reading tea leaves or looking at crystal balls, and frankly that would be a boring job, but I now have a boring job title instead. So I am head of Customer Insight and Futures, which sounds terribly serious. I'm part of BT's global innovation team. I am based just outside Ipswich in the middle of a cow field in a place called Adastral Park, otherwise known as Martlesham as well. So I'm surrounded by an awful lot of very clever people doing some quite weird stuff, frankly, around the future. I always say our approach to the future in BT is trying to build it. So a lot of those guys are doing a lot of very clever stuff with technology. And I am not one of the technologists doing it, I have to say, because I'm not a technologist, I'm a psychologist. My role largely is to spoil the technologists' party by saying, guys, is this really going to work? So my role largely is to look at behaviours, and I keep saying, as part of an innovation team, one of the most disruptive things in the market at the moment, yes, is technology, but actually is us as well. So we are doing some odd things. I have 2 projects. One is on the future of the consumer, and as consumers we are doing quite weird stuff, and I believe there has been some conversations about the loveliness that is omni-channel this morning, so we are doing some weird stuff in terms of leaping around channels, but it doesn't stop there. And the reason why I have another project, which I am going to talk about mostly today, is about the future employee, because oddly enough we don't walk through the office doors, or it doesn't have to be an office anymore. We don't go into work mode and suddenly turn into someone completely different. So we are looking at some very strange behaviours coming into the workforce as well, not least mobile behaviours, because technology is untethering us from the office, from the desk, and that's brilliant. But there are some challenges around that as well. So I don't need a crystal ball, because actually one of the lovely things about working in BT in the innovation space is I get a lot of help, not just from the 3,500 scientists based at Martlesham, but also we've got some wonderful people around the world, not just our own researchers. We have some of the guys at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Frankly, they are the real futurologists. My mind is blown whenever I go to MIT. I'll show you a tiny bit of the work that they're doing there. We also work with the likes of Cambridge University, London Business School, on a lot of topics around the future of work itself. And that is a very large topic. How many hours have you got? Let's have some lunch jokes, shall we? What I am going to do is to try and summarise some of the thinking down to 6 Ds. So if you like Sesame Street, this session is brought to you by the letter D. There's a lot of Ds involved with the future of work, and there's a lot of death involved as well. So a lot of death involved with this presentation, because a number of the Ds are dying. There are a few that are growing as well. But the 6 Ds are, we've got the death of Dolly, of Dilbert, of distance, and of Dr. No. And then we've got the growth of diversity and the droid. So I'm going to cover all of those as we go along. You will find out what on earth I am talking about. But I am going to talk about the first D I'm going to talk about is one of the ones that is rising. So diversity is the first one I'm going to talk about. And this is quite an interesting one for future workforces. We've already got 5 generations for the first time in the workforce. It's probably the first time ever we've had 5 generations in the workforce. And that in itself is an interesting dilemma and challenge. And I always say diversity is a brilliant thing to have in a workforce. You need a diverse workforce, otherwise you're never going to get any new ideas in. If everyone looks like you and thinks like you, you're never going to get real innovation. So in one sense, diversity is a fantastic thing. And there are lots of things in terms of diversity. It's not just about age, it's about sex, it's about cultural orientation, it's about whether you're maybe extrovert or introvert. All of those things provide that lovely extra flavour to a workforce. But I think the one that gets the most attention is age. It is slightly overhyped, but I will say that it's quite an interesting trend that is a challenge in terms of management. Now, the first thing is that kind of one of the ones that tends to get ignored here is the fact that we're aging nicely at the moment. So longevity is going up. Indeed, some futurologists are predicting the death of death. Will we die? Actually, I hope we do, because that's not necessarily a good thing, living forever. But certainly we are. I'm in my 40s. I can legitimately, hopefully if I'm healthy, live into my 90s. Certainly a baby born today can live to 110. Depressingly enough, HSBC did some research last year that basically calculated how long our retirement savings were going to last. And it is 18 years, apparently. If we do the maths, we can start to see the first challenge that we've got into the future is we're going to have to work longer. Linda Grattan, who we work with at London Business School, actually devoted an entire chapter in her latest book called The 100-Year Career. So one of the things that we are seeing is that we are going to have an ageing workforce. I keep saying that's brilliant because we've got a lot of experience that we're retaining, but we need to start to think about agility and flexibility. How do we retain those skills without necessarily employing them for 42 hours a week, running around fixing stuff, you know? There may be other career paths that we need to think about in terms of our experts. So that's one thing. We've got an ageing population. We've also got a generation coming along that are quite an interesting generation on the other side, those Generation Zs. And I keep saying, if you want to see a real insight into the future of work, just watch a teenager playing a massive multiplayer game. So something like Minecraft, for example. So they're working on quite complex environments. It's a virtual environment. They're usually focused on a couple of tasks within that environment. They are often cooperating and collaborating with possibly hundreds of people, some of whom they know, some of whom they don't know, some of whom are in the same country as them. There's some very savvy behaviours. There have been some instances of some teenagers actually employing what is effectively outsourcing the game to China. So whilst they're at school, someone's playing the game for them. So when they come back, points mean prizes. It's brilliant. Now, that's a very savvy set of behaviours. Obviously, things like collaboration, they're using multiple channels, multiple modes. They're using Skype. They're using chats. They do sometimes talk to each other as well. So that all of these things, I think, are really, really exciting for the future of work because they're exactly the kind of collaboration behaviours that we want at work. And we do also know, there's some lovely research that London Business School did last year, that most of us think that we are collaborative. So we think we are naturally collaborative people. The sad thing is that same piece of research also said only 1 in 4 of us are actually good at collaborating. So although we're naturally collaborative, we're not necessarily that good at it. Therein lies one of the dilemmas. And I keep saying, collaboration technologies are there already. We have lots and lots and lots and lots of collaboration technologies, some of which you have been talking about all day. So I'm not going to go into the technology side. I will say one of the problems we have, we call it fragvergence because we like silly words in BT. But effectively what we're finding is we're getting more and more channels to talk to other people about, more and more devices, more and more apps, all sorts of stuff that actually is lovely for collaboration. But unfortunately, it can also cause fragmentation. Again, if we look at age trends on this, if we look at email, which is my pet hate at the moment, frankly, I've got too much of it, I can't handle it. We are abusing email as a collaboration tool. And in actual fact, email is a terrible collaboration tool. Now, the over 50s, we tend to be a product of the technology we have grown up with. The over 50s love email to the extent that they come into an office frequently and email the person opposite them rather than talk to them. So we have this maybe initial problemette maybe, that we are starting to abuse email, largely also because we have a lot of connected devices that are always on and always on us, and there is a kind of expectation when I hit send, you're instantly going to read it. Well, guys, ask an average teenager about email, you'll get a clue as to one of the problems here. They will roll their eyes and go, that's so last year. Why would you want to use email? And in fact, of course, with them, chat tends to be where it's at. They're absolutely focused on chat apps. They're focused on social media. And in some senses, those are much, much better collaboration tools. I always say, to collaborate with someone over email, I need to know who to collaborate with in order to send them an email. With things like social media, I can put something out there and people I don't necessarily know will come to that idea. But therein lies the problem again. Ask a teenager about social media, they go, yeah, that's how I live my lives. Ask an over 50, again, I'm stereotyping hugely here, but largely they equate email with taking photos of your friends lying face down in vomit on a Saturday night. They don't think it's anything to do with work. And it is. It's a really powerful collaboration tool. The trouble is, we've got 5 generations at work. We don't want fragmentation. We actually want to bring people together, and the technology, in some senses, isn't the problem. And the reason why it makes a huge amount of sense for someone kind of with a social science background to start to look at this is it's often a cultural problem. And I keep saying a lot of this lands with leadership. How do you get your leaders to use this technology in order to make sure that they lead by example? So lots of technologies out there, 5 generations at work, brilliant. We've got lots of diversity, but actually diversity can also fragment, so good leadership is very important. That's one of the ones that's on the rise. Let's talk about one of the deaths. Poor little Dilbert. Well, he's not dead. I would hate to kill Dilbert, but his cubicle might be. And this is one of the fascinating things, particularly as we get more mobile workforces. Interestingly enough, BT itself, we were famed back in the 90s for pioneering home working, for example. And we've had, in fact, I think about 73% of our population in BT now are mobile workers. So we've got currently, I think, 10% home workers, 73% mobile, and then very, very few people are actually fixed within an office. But I think we've realised over the years in BT that sometimes meeting people can be quite important. And actually, one of the things that we've found with a mobile and agile workforce is they often never see each other. So one of the questions we have asked is, well, theoretically, we could write an office off. So let's kill Dilbert entirely. He never needs to come into an office. But actually, we're seeing other things go on. So we're seeing some weird stats at the moment. Commute times are going up, not down. I'm sure you have not noticed a diminishment in any traffic on motorways. Trains are still packed. We know that our inner caveman quite likes to see people occasionally. But that's got quite an interesting knock-on effect to office spaces, because previously, office spaces was all about jamming lots of people in, getting bums on seats. And I must admit, most open plan offices, which are horrible places to work, by the way, generally are about 60% empty at any one time. So if we're looking at it as a working space, it's not working at the moment. And there are a few things driving this. The one thing is mobility. We are untethered now. So why should we come into the office? And actually, the answer to that ultimately is to socialise about work, to see people, to meet people, to occasionally do some work. But actually, a lot of the work that we do in physical spaces is all about collaboration. So one of the things that we have been looking at is, if we are creating physical spaces, should they then in themselves become collaboration tools? And actually, do we need lines of desks? I'm having an assault on desks as well at the moment because our technologies are getting a lot smaller. Why do I need a desk? Yes, we're territorial. I'm willing to bet that nearly every one of you sat in the same seats for the entirety of the morning. There is news for you. It is not your seats. But we get very territorial quite fast. So again, it's a big cultural thing. Now, I have become quite sad. Some would say I've been sad for a very long time. But I have become quite sad. I'm collecting office spaces at the moment because I'm finding it quite fascinating around this kind of evolution of this physical collaboration space. And there are the obvious ones like the Googles and Facebooks. I always say Google and Facebook, average age of a Google and Facebook employee, 27 years old. Is home working an option for a 27-year-old? Probably not. They probably don't have a home, for a start. Or maybe some of them live with their parents, even worse. So they don't necessarily have home working as an option. We know they value the office space. And certainly the likes of Google try and keep them in 24 hours a day. They feed them. They do have slides in their office spaces. I have asked why when I'm going around. They say it's all about productivity, frankly. So apparently it's quicker than taking the stairs. I assume on the way down only, though. But go figure with Google, and there are some very interesting office spaces evolving there. But it's intriguing, and again, it's all about what are people doing in these offices. We need to give people, because we have a diverse workforce, one size does not fit all either. We need to give people choices, and there are a lot of choices. We are untethered, so certainly a lot of you guys have a very mobile workforce. They live out of their vans. So how do we actually reintroduce social glue? How do we reintroduce them bumping into each other? And certainly in the BT field force, we've got a little application on their iPhones at the moment that's called Find My Team. Which is obviously you've got geolocation, and obviously originally it was a management application, so I could see where the team was. But actually we find that those guys actually find out that somebody in their team is just down the road, so they go and have a cup of coffee together. Now that might look unproductive, but when I tell you that one time a supermarket decided to improve productivity with shelf stackers, and they banned them talking to each other, and what happened with those shelf stackers? Well, they all left within a week. So we do know social glue is incredibly important. So how do we reintroduce that social glue into the equation? So we've got lots of choices. I personally am a office worker. I tend to not be in the office a tremendous amount. I always say I only need 4 things to work. I need good coffee, good cake, non-negotiable, by the way. Good connectivity, because I need the Wi-Fi wings to fly me into the cloud. And then for me, I need company, and not necessarily company I know, but just a buzz. And there has been some very, very bizarre research that if you pump the noise of a coffee shop into an office, people become more productive. I don't know what is going on there, but there's some weird stuff. Now, we call a lot of the flexible office spaces activity-based working. So in other words, rather than coming through a door and saying, where's my desk? You come in through a door and go, what am I doing today? And you move to the right space. So that's activity-based working. MIT have gone one step further. They're going, well, why should you move to a space when your space can move to you? So they have an entirely robotic office at the moment that basically you can go into various modes and the robots reconfigure the room for you. They even have a robot, well, it's a tea robot, that basically, again, my need for coffee, it'll come round with a little coffee urn whenever I feel the need. So I like that robot, frankly. More about robots in a minute. So we need to rethink our physical spaces, because Dilbert potentially is dead. We do need to understand how people collaborate. This is where some of the more scary stuff from MIT comes in. It's called social physics. Effectively, what they have done is fitted people with RFID tags initially to find out how they're working and who they're collaborating with, who they bump into. So we can start to create things like heat maps. This is the MIT campus. We can figure out who talks to who, how they move around, where the little hotspots for collaboration are. So we can start to figure out in a physical space who's collaborating with who. Then they take it into the digital space. Email, social media, who's actually the hub. There's always someone that's the hub of the network that passes things around. And they might not look very productive, but actually they're the beating heart of the network. So we can start to understand these collaboration activities. And then scarily, they've taken the next step and started to say, can we see the impact of collaboration on productivity? So I gave you the supermarket example. They have others. Contact center, for example, one of the subjects I love talking about. Contact center, they did some work with contact centers because it's easy to measure a contact center advisor. Typically with contact centers, you don't send the whole team off on a coffee break together because there's no one to answer the phones. But they did that just to see the impact on productivity. And guess what? Sending a team away together to have a 10-minute coffee break makes them more productive when they come back. Social glue, very important. The most disturbing one was on a financial trading floor. Again, easy to measure the output on that one. So what they found was there's typically 3 styles of collaboration. One is an echo chamber. This is a not diverse group. This is a group that only talks to each other. There is no diversity in it. You get echoes. The same ideas bouncing around all the time. They don't perform terribly well on a financial trading floor. Then you've got the other side, isolationists. They don't talk to anybody. They don't perform very well on the trading floor. And then you've kind of got an optimal mode where you've got people coming in and out, but they are definitely networking with each other. There's a kind of weird plot they have. It's a big data thing. But there's a weird plot of optimal communication and collaboration. They perform phenomenally on the trading floor. So we're starting to understand how people collaborate. And I think for mobile workforces, we really do need to understand this because they do need to see each other and we often underestimate that social glue. So how can we re-engineer some of this stuff to actually get them more productive rather than less? The death of distance. Now, frankly, this is one, any telecoms company will tell you that their ambition is to kill distance, and BT is no exception on that. And frankly, you can kill distance an awful lot, although face-to-face, as I've just demonstrated, is incredibly important. It is also, it means hours of sitting on motorways and in trains, and frankly, you know, it's all a bit exhausting. So can we kill distance is a really interesting question. And the first thing is, well, we're trying quite desperately already. I mean, we have to a certain extent, and we've got some powerful tools to do this, ranging from the really rich ones like video, and video is growing hugely, phenomenally at the moment. Again, with agile and mobile workforces, they've often got devices with cameras on, and of course, those devices are getting smaller and smaller and starting to be worn on the body as well. So intuitively, video is actually a very powerful tool to kill distance. However, there are some problems with video. One of the problems I call the pajama problem, possibly the underpants problem, depending on what you sleep in. I'm not going to go into that. But one of the issues that we do find is that certainly if people are on a video conference professionally, so for example, I unfortunately do a lot of video conferences to Australia. So of course I then have to get up at 4 in the morning. I have to have a bath. I have to dress the top half of me, doesn't really matter about the bottom half. Do my makeup, clean my lounge, because frankly my lounge is a disaster area. And also, bizarrely, I'm an introvert. You might not guess it, but introverts hate video. So generally what happens, I can't be bothered. I stick a little Post-it note over my video camera and pretend it's broken. So we end up with quite a powerful communication tool that we often underestimate, which is voice. Voice is a really powerful collaboration tool. Now, the thing is, we've all been on audio conferences, frankly, and there are a few issues with those as well. Usually there's a heavy breather. There's always a heavy breather. There's always someone on a train or in a car. There's always two people that kind of sound the same, and we can't tell them apart. And that's a problem. And again, we've had loads of discussions at Adastral over the years around, well, kind of voice has not evolved, so let's evolve it. So actually, one of the things we have been doing in the innovation space is working with the likes of Dolby, for example. You know, the guys that do surround sound cinema. So working with Dolby, bringing that kind of technology into voice is an interesting one, because we can kill the heavy breather using noise-cancelling technologies. We can split the two voices that sound the same. Bill and Bob come from different angles, so we can tell them apart. And then high definition means that we can detect the nuance, because if I do this presentation abroad, I always say, well, I'm English, I never say what I mean. It's all about the intonation, which it is. So you need to pick that kind of stuff up. So certainly I'm less interested about the technology, I'm more interested in the effect on the brain on this. And actually what we're finding is those kind of really rich conferencing, the voice conferences, the same bits of the brain operate, the same bits of the brain that activate during a normal conversation face-to-face activate in those rich video audio conferences. So the first thing is we don't have to work as hard, because in those 2D ones we're frequently trying to work out who's speaking, and you know, frankly we're all on mute doing our email anyway, and then someone asks us a question and we go, what? So we're distracted, basically. So I always say it actually makes us focus a little bit more on the collaboration activity. I can't promise it makes the meeting any more interesting, because frankly, that's up to the person running it, but at least it helps. And then we got the kind of poorer technologies, and I call poorer more things like Twitter, social media, things like that. Can't be profound on social media, but it can provide some of that social glue I was talking about. So you get a peripheral awareness, particularly if you're agile and mobile, you can start to talk to other people doing similar jobs to you with similar interests. It's not going to replace face-to-face. In fact, sometimes it stimulates it. We've got the phenomenon of the tweet up or twunch, where people who don't know each other suddenly found out that they've got very similar interests and say, hey, let's meet up. So we've got all sorts of interesting things, but as I said, I don't think this is necessarily, we've got lots of technology that can do this. The problem, again, is not to create fragmentation. We actually do want people to share and collaborate with each other. And therein lies one other problem as well, particularly when we look at social tools. Those younger generations, they share a lot. They share maybe too much. I'm on the wrong side of 35, and I keep saying that anyone over 35 tended to grow up in an education system where collaboration was called cheating, frankly. Mercifully, that's not how they educate people anymore. So in some senses, the under 35s are more natural collaborators, and they are, of course, very used to the tools for collaboration. And again, therein lies the dilemma. How do we make sure that we include everyone in the conversation? Dolly is all about Dolly Parton. She's not dead, by the way, but you might be suddenly worried. But none of you actually look old enough to remember the 80s, but your mother might have told you about a song called From 9 to 5. And we know that that's kind of dead as well. I can't remember the last time I worked from 9 to 5. Partially it's because of the demand, the 24-hour nature of consumer demands can be fairly problematic. The other thing, of course, that is driving this is those lovely little devices that are always on and always on us, and like screaming 3-year-olds, they're continuously demanding our attention. And sadly enough, most of us sleep with those things within an arm's length. And frankly, that can be problematic if you find it difficult to switch off. This is some of the work we're doing with Cambridge University. Oddly enough, what we're finding is as working hours go up, productivity goes down. Why? Because we get tired, we get stressed, our attention span goes down, we're more likely to make mistakes. So actually we do need to draw a line and turn off, and certainly 1 in 3 of us in the UK are feeling a little bit of techno stress. So actually we said to Cambridge, okay, this is interesting stuff. We've got a number of things that we're trying to do. We're multitasking a lot. So we're juggling, literally our brain is juggling 8 hours a day. That's tiring. That can be a problem. It's tiring. It's not hugely damaging to productivity if you switch off. The problem is task switching. Now, I guarantee I will know if you've task switched, because at the end of the day, if you close your PC down, you've got 2 or 3 emails you started but didn't finish, 4 or 5 documents you started but didn't finish, you were interrupted. So you task switched. And that can be a problem with complex tasks. So it can take between 8 and 20 minutes to get back into a complex task after interruption. The extent of this problem was investigated by London Business School. Linda Grattan estimates that during an average working day, we are now interrupted once every 3 minutes. Hence, this is a big problem. Actually, with Cambridge University, we said, well, this is interesting. What could we do about it? And they came up with it's a diet. Now, we couldn't call it the Cambridge diet because that's already been taken, I believe, but we called it the Balanced Communication Diet for Business, and it's all about trying to recognise how to balance that work-life dilemma. And this is all about individuals taking control, actually being aware of their behaviours, being aware that they can switch off. Obviously, management's got a lot to do with this as well, and maybe culture too. Certainly there are, I think it's Volkswagen in Germany now, won't allow their employees to access email until half an hour before their shift. Now, that's one solution. It's a bit of a kind of, I would call that a sledgehammer to crack a nut, actually, and can be problematic if you aren't doing a 9 to 5 day. It was, of course, motivated in Volkswagen by the fact that people were charging overtime to do their email. So there was a financial cost to it. But we can do all sorts of things to basically help people to manage stuff better, and frankly, email is often the primary culprit of this because, again, our inboxes are too full. So certainly in BT, there was a campaign fairly recently called Think Before You Email. Is it the most appropriate collaboration tool? Because it can cause a fair amount of stress and actually makes our productivity worse. Dr. No is the one the IT guys love, the fact that we are bringing all sorts of stuff in to work that we kind of found useful. So bring our own device, bring our own apps, bring our own software, bring our own office. You name it, we're bringing it, frankly. The problem is that, frankly, most of us kind of go, oh, no, you can't do that, sorry, no. No. Insecure? No. Can't do it. Sorry, no. Then, of course, human nature dictates that we do it anyway because we find it useful. Ultimate nightmare for IT people. Admittedly, you have lost control, guys, if you're saying no. So actually what we're finding is this is a big trend. We know most people do it. We also know that a lot of companies don't have an official policy. So actually they're not necessarily saying no or yes. They're just kind of ignoring it. Actually saying yes is quite a good idea, but bounding that yes, making that yes secure. And this is unstoppable because, frankly, we are getting into the arena of wear your own device very shortly. Again, if you have a lot of teams out on the road, it's much, much easier for them to be wearing a pair of glasses. Now, it might not be Google Glass, although they've promised us it's not entirely dead, Google Glass. They are doing interesting stuff, but we've got HoloLens Microsoft are working on. I think certainly for people that are working in the field, it does connect the disconnected. Certainly if you have got something in front of your eyes, actually giving you lots and lots of information, that's a brilliant thing. And I've always said I thought that Google Glass was primarily an enterprise tool. Of course, this isn't a new thing. This guy, Steve Mann here, was the first cyborg I ever met. He's one of the MIT guys, predictably. I met him when he looked like this. So he had a pair of glasses with a camera. He did have an antenna. He had a very large laptop strapped around his waist. This was the 90s. He had a wire running down his trouser leg, and every time he walked, he recharged his battery. We thought he was weird. He still probably is. That's what he looks like today, actually. He's got a much lighter rig. But we learnt a lot from Steve, not least that you really do need to turn this stuff off when you go to the bathroom. But this is getting unstoppable because obviously we've got all sorts of stuff we can start to do with wearable technologies. We've got all sorts of watches coming along at the moment. We've got gloves. We've got, you name it, we've got it. We're going to be wearing a lot of our technology. And again, it's going to be hard to say no because some of it's actually going to start to be embedded in our body. We have got the potential of a contact lens coming along doing Google Glass type activities at some point. So actually you might not know that people are using this type of technology. So no might not be an answer that you can actually give these guys. So that's unstoppable. The other one that's unstoppable is the rise of the machine, the droid. This is the one where there's a lot of media hype at the moment, not least because, of course, Stephen Hawking and, I believe, the Microsoft guy. Forget his name. Bill Gates, that's the guy. So bad on names. Bad one to forget, dearie me. So they've basically said that, you know, machines are going to be taking our jobs into the future. I think it's going to take a while, frankly, but we do see AI and robotics starting to eat the middle part of jobs away. So, for example, taxi drivers, bit of a downer on that one. So if Uber doesn't get them, frankly, the self-driving car will. So we're getting a lot of jobs starting to become eaten by AI. Even doctors who may think that they're safe. IBM's Watson, which won Jeopardy, they seem to be very, very proud about that. But they also claim they can diagnose a GP. So the diagnostic capabilities of a general practitioner might well start to go to AI. Now, I have to say that there's more to life, or a GP's life, than diagnostics. There's caring, there's empathy. Those are all things that are very, very difficult to automate. So those are the kind of skills that we are really going to value into the workforce, the stuff that machines cannot do. Intuition, empathy, negotiation, all of that kind of stuff is going to take a while to automate out. But what we are finding is this hollowing out of work. We are getting these very highly skilled, highly paid jobs, highly sought after skills. We're not going to have enough people to do those things because they are very highly sought after skills. And then we've got other things that are worth automating. Now, there is a hotel in Japan that is opening, I think it's this month, that is entirely robotic. A robot hotel, but they have told me that their robotic housekeepers take 15 minutes to fold one towel. So actually, probably it's cheaper and more effective to employ a person to fold the towel. Frankly, you're not going to pay them very much, and therein lies the problem. Those jobs are not worth automating. So we've got this real hollowing out process going on, and that's not going to stop, certainly as we get into smart cities, smart housing, Internet of Things, clouds of clouds. We are going to get an awful lot more intelligence there, and actually the AI with the capability to make a lot of very, very real-time judgments on it. So we could have a challenge on our hands, and I always say this is already happening. We have got some weird stuff going on in the market. So obviously there was a meme on Twitter, which is of course where I get my news now, saying, you know, Uber, world's biggest taxi company, hasn't got any taxis. Facebook, world's biggest media company, doesn't produce any media. Airbnb, world's biggest hotel company, no hotels. Very strange world it's becoming. So this is some really, really interesting, slightly scary stuff to maybe finish on. But I don't think robots are going to eat all of our jobs. I do think certain aspects of our jobs are going to be automated. If you are following a flowchart, you will not have a job. Contact centers especially, beware. You're going to have to be doing some real complex stuff. They're already doing that because we're pushing a lot to self-service. When people get in touch with the contact center, very complex stuff. Things that they have to solve. So who do we employ in our contact centres? Where are they? Are they a network of experts? Again, employed anywhere rather than someone sitting in a very big room. So all sorts of things come out of the rise of the droid, which I'm going to leave it on because I'm sure your stomachs are starting to rumble now, and there's a fantastic view upstairs as well. And I am between you and that view. But those were the 6Ds. Shaping the future of work. So we've got the death of Dolly, of Dilbert, of distance, and of Dr. No, and we have the rise of diversity and the droid. Thank you very much for listening.